All right. So, what I wanted to talk about today is just a little bit about the real facts about terrorism in the world. How often it happens, where it happens, and how's it trending? What's different about it? So, I got this information from a world database about world health and various types of death that people are experiencing in different countries as diseases. We're going to focus today on terrorism, which is kind of a sad topic, but it's one that can be interesting. And there's been wars fought about it, so it's interesting to try to understand what's actually happening in some of these countries. So I loaded this data that I got from GitHub, and I filtered it out to get it into groups that we wanted, different countries, so that we can see what we're looking at here. So to get things started, we can look at how terrorism has been trending in the entire world. So this kind of gives us a baseline here. So we can see at the bottom here on the x-axis we have the years, we have the deaths on the left, and this is how things are trending. So just to point out some important dates here. You got 2001, you have 9/11, which really was the kickstarter to getting the US involved in the war on terror in the Middle East. And so really the US's interventions in the Middle East, especially in Iraq, really got started in 2003. And we continued to progress around 2007, 2008. We began to pull back in Iraq, but we continued on in the Middle East. And you can see here, this red line is the average number of deaths per year in the whole world. But you can also see that really things have been trending upward, especially as around 2014 we started to see a real pickup with ISIS. So this right here is just going to show you the Middle East itself. Instead of just the whole world, we're going to look just at the Middle East. So this was also just Middle East countries that have particular hard time with terror. So this is Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Syria is what we have included for this data. So we could see here again, same pattern. So before 2001, things were actually generally quite flat. Terrorism deaths that were recorded were not very high. But as the intervention after 9/11, things started to really pick up, and Al-Qaeda started gaining further steam, and so did ISIS as they came to be. And you can see that really since about 2011, they have not been under the average again in total terrorism deaths. So really it is something that's progressively been getting worse over the years with the kind of exclusion of the last few years, where we saw some major defeats for ISIS in cities like Mosul that were taken back from the hands of ISIS. So that is one plus side of all this, is we're finally starting to see the Middle East trend downward a little bit again in terrorism, which is a great thing to see. Now this right here, I wanted to show, just so we can get an idea, like how the world is influenced by the Middle East's terrorism problems and how it branches out. So this one might be a little hard to understand at first, but we have a bar chart here. This is the world's total deaths from terrorism. And then each red dot is its own country inside of that year. So down here at the bottom, I can tell there's not many insights worth gaining down here. But what you can really see is that some of these countries have the vast majority of a single year's terrorism attacks. Like this is over 50% was one country in that year. You can see Iraq, Nigeria, those are the big leaders. Afghanistan's not far behind. These are countries that really lead the world's terrorism, which is so sad to think about. But not only do they lead to high terrorism deaths in their countries, but they spew the terrorism and they recruit throughout the world. And so when these Middle Eastern countries experience high terrorism, so generally does the rest of the world. And to further prove that point, here we can graph, this is the world's terrorism numbers graphed to the red is those Middle Eastern countries, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, to name just a few. And you can see that really the vast majority again of the terrorism related deaths are coming from those countries. And when those countries are experiencing lower terrorism deaths, so is the rest of the world. And as we're going to start to see ISIS become further and further removed out of the Middle East, we hopefully will see those trending downward. The one fear that we have here is that, as the US and other countries withdraw troops it'll be something to see if another terrorism group will come to lead out in the Middle East, and we'll see things just go back to where they are, or will things continue trending downward. Of course, that's the hope. And then the last thing to really show here is this one's a little rougher on the eyes, but it really shows 1 year, the most recent year, 2017. It shows total terrorism deaths. Most of these countries are sitting down here around zero, maybe, a couple, but mostly zero, one event type countries. We can see that really all countries, the average is going to be far under 1,000, probably under 200-300. But we can see these are the countries that are leading the world in terrorism and that are having real systemic issues within their countries. We have Pakistan, we have Somalia. Somalia is over Pakistan. We have Syria, and we have Nigeria. Those are countries that we don't think about as much when it comes to terrorism. And we also have the Congos not far behind and some other African countries. But we can see up here, again, by far, Afghanistan and Iraq are still really struggling with total terrorism. Over 6,000 deaths when most countries are hovering around 100. So that's something worth thinking about as you hear more and more about the upcoming political debates, and you hear more and more about what we should do in the Middle East. Should we be there at all? Should we be involved? Doesn't matter. A lot of people think that us being there doesn't affect us at all as a world or as a country. So why are we there? And this is just, it's up to you to decide really, but the data shows that the Middle Eastern's terrorism does have a large impact on the rest of the world. And there's a high correlation. When the Middle East has higher terrorism years, so does the rest of the world. And so it's worth thinking about, does what happened over there, is it worth American lives? Is it worth your country's lives to protect lives there? And does it affect you? So that's something to think about when this is debated again, which I'm sure it will be come November.